Deep in the heart of the Congo Basin, where the world's second-largest tropical rainforest stretches endlessly across Central Africa, lies a wilderness so ancient and untamed that it seems forgotten by time itself. Here, beneath a canopy so thick that sunlight barely penetrates to the forest floor, extraordinary stories unfold daily between humans and the magnificent creatures that call this place home. Among the most remarkable of these tales is the true story of Dr. Sarah Chen, a dedicated wildlife veterinarian whose single act of compassion would forge an unbreakable bond that would ultimately save her life in the most unexpected and dramatic way possible. Dr. Sarah Chen had always been drawn to the wild places of the world. Born in San Francisco to immigrant parents who valued education above all else, she could have easily followed a conventional path into human medicine. Instead, something deeper called to her, a profound connection to the natural world and an unwavering belief that all living creatures deserved care and protection. After completing her veterinary degree at UC Davis, she specialized in wildlife medicine, driven by a passion that her friends and family often struggled to understand. Why, they wondered, would she choose to work with dangerous animals in remote locations when she could have had a comfortable practice treating pets in suburban California? The answer lay in Sarah's fundamental belief that humans had a responsibility to protect the species they had driven to the brink of extinction. By 2018, she had been working in Central Africa for 2 years, moving from country to country as conservation needs demanded. Her work was dangerous, often thankless, and paid very little, but it fulfilled her in ways that no comfortable suburban practice ever could. It was during a particularly challenging assignment in the Democratic Republic of Congo that Sarah's life would change forever. She had been called to the region to assist with anti-poaching efforts and provide medical care for animals injured by snares and traps. The poaching crisis in the Congo had reached devastating proportions, with organized criminal networks systematically destroying wildlife populations for profit. Gorillas, elephants, and countless other species were being slaughtered not just for their meat, but for body parts that could be sold on the international black market. On that fateful morning in March 2018, Sarah's local guide Kito led her through dense jungle vegetation following reports of an injured silverback gorilla. The trek was arduous, requiring them to navigate through thick vines, across fallen logs, and around massive buttress roots that rose like natural walls from the forest floor. The humidity was oppressive, and the constant buzz of insects created a symphony that seemed to follow them deeper into the wilderness. When they finally reached the small clearing where the gorilla had been spotted, Sarah's heart sank at the sight before her. There, lying motionless against a fallen mahogany log, was one of the most magnificent silverback gorillas she had ever seen. Even in his weakened state, his massive frame commanded respect. He weighed easily over 400 pounds, with silver-tipped fur across his broad back and arms that were thicker than most people's torsos. But it was the crude wire snare wrapped tightly around his left arm that held Sarah's attention. The poacher's trap had been set with ruthless efficiency. Made from thick cable wire, it was designed to tighten as the animal struggled, cutting deeper and deeper into flesh until the victim either died from blood loss or infection. In this gorilla's case, the wire had cut so deep that Sarah could see bone. The surrounding tissue was swollen, infected, and reeking of decay. Blood had dried in dark patches around the wound, and flies buzzed incessantly around the injury site. The gorilla's breathing was shallow and labored, each rise and fall of his massive chest an obvious struggle. His eyes, when they occasionally fluttered open, were clouded with pain and fever. Sarah had seen enough wildlife injuries to know that without immediate medical intervention, this magnificent creature would die a slow, agonizing death within days. Most people, even experienced wildlife professionals, would have approached such a situation with extreme caution. A silverback gorilla, even when injured, possesses the strength of 10 men. Their massive hands can crush bones with ease, and their bite force exceeds that of a great white shark. When cornered or frightened, they become one of nature's most formidable opponents. But Sarah saw something different in this gorilla's eyes during the brief moments when they were open. Despite his pain and weakness, there was an unmistakable intelligence in his gaze. This wasn't the vacant stare of a simple animal driven by instinct. This was the look of a sentient being who understood his predicament, who recognized that he was dying, and who perhaps sensed that these humans might be different from the ones who had set the trap that was killing him. "I know you're scared," Sarah whispered as she slowly approached the injured giant, whom she had already begun thinking of as Konga, a name that seemed to fit his magnificent presence. "But this infection will kill you if we don't act fast. I'm here to help, not hurt you." The gorilla's eyes tracked her movement as she carefully unpacked her medical supplies. Every gesture was deliberate and non-threatening. She spoke to him in soothing tones throughout the process, explaining what she was doing as if he could understand every word. In many ways Sarah believed he could. Preparing the sedative was the most dangerous part of the procedure. She would need to get close enough to administer the injection, which meant coming within arm's reach of a creature capable of killing her instantly. But as Sarah approached with the syringe, something remarkable happened. The gorilla made no aggressive moves. Instead, he simply watched her with those intelligent brown eyes, as if he had made a conscious decision to trust this human who spoke to him so gently. The sedative took effect slowly, and Sarah used the time to examine the extent of his injuries more thoroughly. The wire snare had not only cut deep into his arm but had also caused significant damage to the surrounding muscle and tissue. The infection was severe, with signs that it was beginning to spread systemically. Without treatment, the gorilla would have been dead within 48 hours. Working with the precision of a surgeon and the gentleness of a mother caring for her child, Sarah began the delicate process of removing the wire snare. Each twist of the cable had embedded it deeper into the flesh, requiring careful manipulation to extract it without causing additional damage. The process took nearly an hour, during which Sarah had to frequently pause to clean away blood and infected tissue. Once the snare was completely removed, Sarah thoroughly cleaned the wound with antiseptic solution, removed dead tissue, and applied antibiotic ointment to combat the infection. The injury required over 30 stitches to close properly, each one placed with meticulous care. Throughout the entire procedure, even as the sedative began to wear off, Konga remained remarkably calm, never once showing signs of aggression or panic. As Sarah worked, she found herself talking to the gorilla continuously. She told him about her life, her passion for wildlife conservation, and her dreams of a world where humans and animals could coexist peacefully. She explained each step of the medical procedure, as if he were a human patient who deserved to understand what was happening to him. And perhaps most remarkably, Konga seemed to listen. His eyes, when open, remained focused on her face, and he made soft rumbling sounds that Sarah had never heard from a wild gorilla before. Completing the immediate medical treatment was only the beginning. Sarah knew that Konga would require constant monitoring for at least a week to ensure that the infection didn't return and that the wound healed properly. This meant making a decision that would seem foolish to most people. She chose to set up camp in the jungle, staying within a dangerous wilderness filled with leopards, venomous snakes, and potentially hostile poachers to care for her patient. Quito, her local guide, was incredulous. "Doctor," he said in his accented English, "this is very dangerous. We should return to the village and send rangers to check on the gorilla later." But Sarah was adamant. "He saved my life once," she explained, though she couldn't quite articulate what she meant by that. "Metaphorically speaking, studying these magnificent creatures is why I became a veterinarian. It's why I'm here instead of treating house cats in California. Now it's my turn to save his life, literally." The week that followed would prove to be one of the most extraordinary experiences of Sarah's life. Each morning she would approach Konga's resting place with fresh medical supplies and food. Each day he seemed to trust her a little more. By the third day he allowed her to change his bandages without any sedation. By the fifth day he was accepting fruit directly from her hands. And by the seventh day he was making those soft rumbling sounds whenever she approached, sounds that gorilla researchers had identified as expressions of contentment and affection. During quiet moments, Sarah would sit nearby and write in her research journal. "Day 5, she wrote, "Konga allowed me to change his bandages without sedation. There's an intelligence in his eyes that's almost human. He watches me work with what I can only describe as curiosity and gratitude. This challenges everything I thought I knew about the emotional capacity of wild gorillas." The transformation in Konga was remarkable. The fever broke on the 4th day, and by the 6th day he was sitting up and showing interest in his surroundings. His appetite returned, and Sarah was amazed by his gentleness as he accepted food from her. This was a creature capable of snapping her arm like a twig, yet he took fruit from her fingers with the delicacy of a grandmother handling fine china. But perhaps the most extraordinary moment came on the 7th day, as Sarah removed the final bandages from Konga's arm. The wound had healed beautifully, with only a thin pink line showing where the wire had cut so deeply. As she examined her work, checking that the healing was complete and that there were no signs of remaining infection, Konga did something that would remain etched in Sarah's memory forever. Slowly, deliberately, he reached out with one massive finger, easily the size of a person's thumb, and gently touched the back of Sarah's hand. It was a gesture so human, so obviously intentional, that it brought tears to her eyes. In that moment she felt a connection that transcended species barriers, a communication that needed no words. "You're welcome," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. For several minutes they simply looked at each other. Sarah, this small human who had risked everything to save him, and Konga, this magnificent gorilla who had somehow understood that she was different from the humans who had hurt him. Then, with a grace that seemed impossible for such a massive creature, Konga rose to his full height of over 8 feet. Standing there in the dappled sunlight of the forest clearing, he was truly magnificent. His silver-tipped fur gleamed, his powerful muscles rippled beneath his skin, and his presence filled the space with an almost regal authority. He looked at Sarah one final time, made that soft rumbling sound she had come to associate with their bond, and then turned and walked into the jungle. Sarah called after him, "Stay safe, Konga," but he had already disappeared into the thick vegetation, leaving only the memory of his gentle touch and the profound connection they had shared. 3 years passed like pages turning in a book. Sarah continued her conservation work throughout Central Africa, treating injured animals, training local veterinarians, and fighting tirelessly against the illegal wildlife trade that continued to decimate animal populations across the continent. Her work took her to remote villages, government offices, and deep into wilderness areas where few humans had ever ventured. The experience with Konga had changed her in subtle but profound ways. She found herself more attuned to the emotional lives of the animals she treated, more convinced than ever that the line between human and animal intelligence was far thinner than most people believed. She began documenting not just the medical aspects of her work, but the behavioral observations that suggested deep emotional capacity in the creatures she helped. In 2021, Sarah's research brought her to Virunga National Park, one of Africa's oldest and most biodiverse protected areas. Despite ongoing political instability in the region, the park remained a crucial sanctuary for mountain gorillas, forest elephants, and countless other species. Sarah had been called in to assist with a long-term behavioral study of gorilla families, work that would require weeks of careful observation in the field. Her research team consisted of James, a young primatologist fresh from graduate school who was eager to prove himself in the field, and Marie, an experienced French researcher who had been studying great apes for over a decade. As they prepared for their expedition into the park's interior, local guides began telling them stories of a legendary silverback gorilla known for his unusual size and intelligence. "The gorilla they call Konga," their lead guide explained, "is different from others. He shows no fear of humans but also no aggression. The local people say he watches them work in their fields, as if he is studying them the way they study him." Sarah's heart skipped a beat at the mention of the name. "Konga? Are you certain that's what they call him?" "Yes, doctor. He leads a family group in the eastern sector of the park. Very large male with a scar on his left arm. The guides say he has been seen many times, always peaceful, always watching. Could it possibly be the same gorilla?" Sarah's mind raced with possibilities and doubts. Gorillas were known to travel significant distances, and 3 years would have been enough time for her Konga to establish himself as a dominant male with his own family group. The scar on the left arm seemed too much of a coincidence to ignore. As her team trekked deeper into the park, following paths used by researchers and park rangers, Sarah found herself both hoping and fearing that she would encounter her old friend. What if he didn't remember her? What if the bond she remembered so clearly had been nothing more than temporary gratitude that had long since faded? What if he had become territorial and aggressive, as many silverbacks do when establishing their dominance? The answers to these questions came on their 3rd day in the field. Following signs of recent gorilla activity, broken vegetation, knuckle prints in soft earth, and the distinctive smell that marks gorilla territory, the research team found themselves at the edge of a peaceful forest clearing where a family group was feeding on wild celery and bamboo shoots. At the center of the group sat the most magnificent silverback Sarah had ever seen. He was larger than she remembered, his silver back broader, his presence even more commanding. But there, on his left arm, barely visible through his thick fur, was a thin pink scar that told the story of their first encounter. When Konga looked up and saw the research team watching from the forest edge, Sarah held her breath. For a moment, his intelligent brown eyes scanned the group of humans, and then they focused on her. Recognition didn't come gradually, it was instant and unmistakable. His head tilted slightly to one side, exactly as it had 3 years earlier, and then he made that same soft rumbling sound that Sarah remembered so clearly. "Incredible," James whispered. "He's looking right at you, Sarah. It's like he knows you." "He does," Sarah replied softly, stepping slightly forward. "Hello again, old friend." Konga's response was to make that rumbling sound again, louder this time, and several members of his family group looked up curiously. But there was no alarm, no signs of territorial aggression. Instead, the great silverback seemed genuinely pleased to see her again. The research team spent the following days observing Konga's family group, documenting their behaviors, social interactions, and daily routines. Throughout their stay, Konga showed a remarkable tolerance for their presence, often positioning himself where he could keep an eye on Sarah while still attending to his family responsibilities. It was clear to everyone that there was a special connection between the veterinarian and the gorilla, though none of the other researchers could fully understand its depth. On their final night in the field, as Sarah sat by the campfire updating her research notes while James and Marie slept peacefully in their tents nearby, she had no idea that her life was about to be placed in mortal danger. The crackling flames cast dancing shadows on the surrounding trees, and the night sounds of the jungle provided a constant backdrop of chirping insects, distant bird calls, and the occasional rustle of small animals moving through the underbrush. Sarah was completely absorbed in her work, documenting the remarkable behavioral observations they had made over the past week. She wrote about Konga's obvious recognition, his protective behavior toward his family, and the way he seemed to remember and trust her despite the 3 years that had passed since their first encounter. She was so focused on her writing that she didn't notice the subtle change in the jungle's nighttime symphony. The insects gradually quieted, night birds stopped calling, and an ominous silence began to settle over their camp. It wasn't until a twig snapped loudly in the darkness beyond the firelight that Sarah looked up from her journal. "James? Marie?" she called softly, not wanting to wake them unnecessarily but suddenly feeling uneasy about the unusual quiet that had fallen over the forest. No response came from either tent. Both remained still, their occupants deep in the exhausted sleep that comes after long days of physical exertion in challenging conditions. Another snap, closer this time, made Sarah's heart begin to race. She reached for her flashlight, but before she could turn it on, 3 figures emerged from the darkness at the edge of camp. They were armed men, their faces hard and cruel in the flickering firelight, their weapons trained directly on her. The leader of the group, a thin man with scars on his face and cold, calculating eyes, spoke in heavily accented English. "You are Dr. Chen, the veterinarian. The one who interferes with our business." Sarah's blood ran cold as she realized who these men were and why they had come. These were poachers, members of the organized criminal networks that made their living from the illegal wildlife trade. Her conservation work, her efforts to save injured animals and support anti-poaching initiatives, had clearly made her a target. "I don't know what you're talking about," Sarah replied, trying to keep her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her veins. The second poacher, a larger man with hands that showed the calluses of someone accustomed to violence, stepped forward. "You save the animals we hunt. You train the rangers who arrest our people. You cost us much money, Doctor." The leader raised his rifle, the barrel pointing directly at Sarah's chest. "Tonight you pay for that interference. Tonight your work ends permanently." Sarah's mind raced, searching for any possible escape route. Her colleagues were sleeping only yards away, but calling out would only put them in danger as well. These men were clearly prepared to kill, and she had no doubt that they would eliminate any witnesses without hesitation. "Please," she said, slowly raising her hands in surrender. "I just want to help the animals. They're endangered. If we don't protect them, they'll disappear forever." "Enough talk," the leader snarled, his finger moving to the trigger. "Your protection ends now." Sarah closed her eyes, certain that her dedication to wildlife conservation was about to cost her everything. In those final moments, her mind filled with images of all the animals she had helped over the years, all the lives she had saved, and all the work that would go unfinished if she died here in this remote forest clearing. But then the jungle erupted. The sound that shattered the night air was unlike anything the poachers had ever heard, a roar so deep, so powerful, so filled with primal fury that it seemed to shake the very ground beneath their feet. It was the battle cry of a silverback gorilla defending his family, amplified by rage and protective instinct. Konga charged into the clearing like a force of nature unleashed. Standing at his full height of over 8 feet, with his massive arms spread wide and his fangs bared in a display of raw power, he was a sight that would haunt the poacher's nightmares for years to come. His silver-tipped fur stood on end, making him appear even larger, and his dark eyes blazed with an intelligence and fury that was unmistakably personal. He positioned himself directly between Sarah and the armed men, creating an impenetrable wall of muscle, bone, and determination. His chest-beating display was so thunderous that it echoed through the forest, and his roars were so loud that they could be heard for miles in every direction. The poachers, men who had faced down charging elephants and wounded leopards, men who made their living in one of the world's most dangerous professions, were reduced to terrified children in the face of Konga's magnificent rage. They fired wildly into the air, their hands shaking so badly they could barely hold their weapons, but the great silverback didn't retreat. Instead, he advanced toward them, his intimidating display growing more intense with each step. "Gorilla! Gorilla!" the second poacher screamed in panic, his voice cracking with fear. "We go! We go now!" the leader shouted, and all three men turned and fled into the jungle, crashing through vegetation in their desperate haste to escape the wrath of this magnificent creature who had appeared like an avenging angel to protect the woman who had once saved his life. As the sounds of their panicked retreat faded into the distance, Konga slowly turned to face Sarah. The transformation was immediate and profound. The fierce protector who had just terrorized three armed men became once again the gentle giant she remembered from 3 years earlier. His expression shifted from primal fury to recognition and concern, and he approached her slowly, as if checking to make sure she was unharmed. Once again he reached out with that same massive finger and gently touched her hand, the same gesture from 3 years ago, now carrying an even deeper meaning. It was a moment of connection that transcended species barriers, a communication of love, loyalty, and protection that needed no words. "Thank you," Sarah whispered through her tears, her voice thick with emotion and gratitude. "You saved my life, Konga. You actually saved my life." The magnitude of what had just occurred was almost impossible to comprehend. This magnificent creature had not only remembered the woman who had saved him 3 years earlier, but had been watching over her camp, protecting her from dangers she didn't even know existed. When she needed him most, he had risked his own safety to defend her, just as she had once risked hers to save him. James and Marie emerged from their tents, awakened by the commotion and the sound of gunshots. They stood in amazement, watching as one of nature's most powerful creatures showed gentle affection toward their colleague. "Sarah," Marie breathed, "this is unprecedented. I've never seen anything like it in 20 years of studying great apes." As dawn approached, Konga remained near their camp, keeping watch until he was certain that Sarah was safe. Only when the morning sun began to filter through the forest canopy did he finally prepare to return to his family. Before leaving, he looked at Sarah one last time and made that soft rumbling sound that had become their special form of communication. The next morning brought park rangers who had been alerted by the sound of gunshots. They found and arrested the 3 poachers several miles away, still fleeing through the forest in terror. The men were so traumatized by their encounter with Konga that they confessed to multiple wildlife crimes and provided information that led to the arrest of several other members of their criminal network. As Sarah packed her equipment to continue her research elsewhere, she reflected on the extraordinary bond she had witnessed and experienced. In her final journal entry about the encounter, she wrote, "3 years ago, I saved an injured gorilla's life. Last night he returned the favor. This experience has fundamentally changed my understanding of animal consciousness, memory, and emotion." Konga demonstrated not just intelligence, but moral behavior, the capacity for gratitude, loyalty, and self-sacrifice that we typically associate only with humans. In the distance, Konga sat peacefully with his family group, occasionally looking toward where Sarah's camp had been, as if sensing her departure. This magnificent creature, whom many would dismiss as just an animal, had demonstrated qualities that some humans struggle to achieve: perfect memory of kindness received, unwavering loyalty to those who had helped him, and the courage to risk his own safety to protect someone he cared about. Today, mountain gorillas remain critically endangered, with fewer than 1,000 individuals surviving in the wild. The work of veterinarians like Dr. Sarah Chen, combined with dedicated conservation efforts and protection from poaching, offers hope for their survival. But perhaps more importantly, stories like this one remind us that we share our planet with creatures capable of profound emotional connections, complex moral reasoning, and behaviors that challenge our understanding of what it means to be sentient. The bond between Dr. Sarah Chen and Konga represents something larger than just an unusual friendship between human and animal. It challenges our fundamental assumptions about the natural world and our place within it. In an era when humans often see themselves as separate from and superior to other species, their story provides powerful evidence that compassion, loyalty, and love transcend the artificial boundaries we have created between ourselves and the rest of the living world. Some encounters change us forever, leaving invisible marks on our souls that time cannot erase. Some debts of gratitude transcend species barriers and span years, waiting for the perfect moment to be repaid. But sometimes, in the most unexpected moments and in the most unlikely places, the universe finds a way to balance the scales of compassion and kindness. In the heart of the Congo rainforest, Where ancient trees have witnessed countless dramas of life and death, survival and extinction, a wounded gorilla and a compassionate veterinarian proved that the most powerful force in nature isn't strength or speed or cunning. It's the invisible thread of connection that binds all living beings when we choose kindness over fear, compassion over indifference, and love over hatred. This is the true story of how one woman's act of compassion created a bond that would save her life 3 years later, reminding us all that in our interconnected world, every act of kindness matters. In a time when cynicism often overshadows hope, when the destruction of the natural world seems inevitable, stories like this one offer a different possibility, a future where humans and animals can coexist not just peacefully, but as partners in the grand adventure of life on Earth. The legacy of Sarah and Konga's extraordinary friendship continues to inspire conservationists, researchers, and animal lovers around the world. Their story serves as a powerful reminder that love, in all its forms, truly can conquer all, even the barriers between species that we once thought were insurmountable.